day and night.
Chase your tail light. I'll be under your skin, letting you go for a while. Then I'm taking you in. Your face like diamonds, a glimmer and punch. Shiny predator with a golden gun. Space age girl machine. 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 Space age girl
Welcome back, nerdlings, to another episode of Comics and Cosmetics. And again, we have a really awesome guest here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, nerdlings of all sizes, I present to you Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist Josh Adams. Thank you
Hi,
for
everybody.
joining us, Josh.
Glad to be here.
Hope you had a good Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah, it was good. You know, it's Christmas, it's New Year's. You know, it's time to celebrate, right? You know,
Right.
always a good time.
Now, I have 4 kids, so it always kind of leaves me with this sense of inadequacy and guilt that I've spent so much money and they're probably still unhappy somehow. My go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm one of 5, so
Yeah.
I can say, yeah, it's pretty crazy. And holiday times, you know, I think you come to respect the effort and the I don't want to say sacrifice, but just the effort and the commitment that's put into supplying the holiday cheer for 5 kids. Because I mean, we had some significant age differences, so we weren't all kids at the time, but it was a big family, and you see that a lot of people put in a lot of effort to make sure everyone's happy on the holidays. So 4 kids, I'm sure that's a lot of work.
Yeah. My youngest daughter is 14, and this
Mm.
year she finally acknowledged, like she said, she asked me, well, what are you going to get in your stocking or something along those lines, like referencing me getting something in my Christmas stocking. I was like, oh, honey, I'm the mom. Nobody puts anything in my stocking. Nobody. And she goes, so you do all of this. You do all the shopping. You make all the Christmas stockings by hand. You wrap everything. You make the dinner, which takes roughly 12 hours total. And you don't get anything? And I said, nope. And she goes, I don't think I want kids. I don't think I want to be a mom. Like, it's a perfectly
Yeah.
rational reaction.
It's a lot of work, but at the same time, you get to the point where you do have kids, and if you had that feeling when you were younger, you just don't have the perspective yet to realize how rewarding it can be to be giving gifts to your kids. I have a daughter, and she's old enough now to she's a teenager. She's out of high school, and she has come to respect the effort that we put into Christmas, and we kept Santa alive for a long time.
Yeah.
For Christmas, we would get her gifts from us, but we would also make sure that every year we got a gift, and we'd usually find someone on Etsy, or we'd find some local place to get a gift that she knew we couldn't find on Amazon or find in a store. So for a couple of years, when she was really into Adventure Time, we found this person on Etsy who made custom Adventure Time stuffed animals, and so we'd get those for her. So we always kept that, and we'd say that's from Santa, you know.
We had a
So we kept it.
bag. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, no, yeah, go ahead.
We have this Santa sack. Well, we had the Santa sack when my kids were younger, and all the Santa presents went in there. So they
Mm,
knew, you know. But most of the like the big flashy stuff, the Red Ryder BB guns of the gifts would be
yeah.
from us. And then the more practical gifts would be from Santa because you know what? I wanted the credit. I'm not too proud to admit it. I wanted the credit.
That's fair.
But we have a lot of Christmas traditions that we really do try to keep alive. For instance, I make all the Christmas stockings. You know, if there's a new member of the family, I make one by
Mm.
hand. And every year you get an orange and a little bag of Cheetos in the Christmas stocking. And when my boyfriend celebrated our first Christmas together, he was like, "Why is there an orange in a bag? That's not very Christmas." So, well, when I was 6, it was just my mom and I, and we lived in a one-room apartment, didn't really have much, and, like, she had to hang my Christmas stocking on the back of the door, and she was worried because she didn't have anything. We'd just moved, didn't have anything to put in it, except for an orange and a bag of Cheetos, and she said the next morning, Christmas morning, I wake up, I run, I get my stocking, and I start squealing with joy that I've got an orange and a bag of Cheetos. I love oranges and Cheetos. And she said it made her cry, because I was so happy. And she decided she was going to continue to do that every year to remind us that, this is what Christmas is about, just being together. Sometimes all you have is an orange and a bag of Cheetos, but be happy you got that.
Yeah,
So we
yeah,
still do that like 35 years later. We still do it. But that's I love traditions. It's something that connects you to the past and the future at the same time. You know, like pass it on to your
yeah,
kids and know that one
absolutely.
day they're going to do it too. Yay, traditions. As I said, you won the Pulitzer this last year for
Yes.
cartooning. And you are very prolific from what I can see. I mean, you've worked on several books. You still cartoon for fun. You draw and sketch for fun, and you
Mhm.
share it with us on Twitter. When did you know? Like, when did you realize, like, this is it? This is it for me. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Nothing else.
Uh, that's a good question, I suppose. I drew my whole life. My
Hmm.
dad was a comic book artist and a commercial illustrator, and so I always had drawing in my life. So I never thought of it from an early age like I'm going to become a comic book artist or I'm going to do something with illustration. It was just drawing. You do it.
Hmm.
Um, and then as I started to get into my teen years, 12, 13, 14, and I was known for, being the kid in school who could draw. Um,
Hmm.
you start to have that sort of teenage rebelliousness towards, everyone's expectation of you. So uh, when I went to high school, I went to high school at a school that had, a really big sports program and, a big academic program. It was just a big school that had lots of opportunities. Yeah. So, I went to this high school and I tried different things. I tried
Hmm.
sports teams. I tried out for, I did music. I was in a band. I did experimented,
Hmm.
and I did okay academically. But at the time it was like I wanted to at least figure out, you know, if art was what I was going to do, to try out and see what things I definitely didn't want to do at some point.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess by the time I finished high school, it just made sense. It was something that I did, when no one else was even looking. I wasn't like looking for approval. I wasn't looking for, something special from it. It's just something I did. And so at that point, that's really when it made sense. Um, and of course, I had my dad around. He was always drawing. And I think for people who don't have that, the prospect of using your ability to draw as a future seems a little more abstract. And for me, it seemed like the most logical thing in the world.
For those who don't know, your father is Neal Adams,
Hmm.
probably the most legendary Batman artist, and not just Batman, but I mean, he saved Batman. Let's face it, he really did. The man is an absolute legend.
Hmm.
I mean, what is that? I don't want to be just all encompassing. Is like, what was that like, man? But what kind of impact and influence on you did that have? Like, how his contributions to comics and media. I mean, obviously that means quite a lot to you as his son, but as an artist and a comic reader, like how did that really impact you with your career choices?
Well, I mean, if you go back to an early age, I would say that for probably up until I was maybe in my mid teens, early teens, like I didn't really have a huge perspective on my dad's relevance in comics or in the world, really. Um, because I grew up, I mean, I was born in 87, and my dad was pretty far out of the mainstream comic book conversation at the time. And back then you didn't have the internet, you couldn't look people up on Wikipedia. So I was just exposed to who my dad was right then and at that time.
Mhm.
And he was a person who did commercial art, storyboards, animatics, things like that. And he did a lot of really cool stuff. I mean, he was designing amusement parks and doing things for different movies. And it was all very impressive and very cool, to grow up with that. And we always had comic books around the house because he had a standing order for every new comic that came out each week.
Oh,
Um,
that's so
'Cause
cool.
he just, yeah, he engrossed himself in it. He always loved comics. And so growing up, I was used to the version of dad that was a commercial artist. And he did do publishing, to be fair.
Mhm.
But when you're a kid, there's Batman and there's Superman and Wonder Woman, Spider-Man and the X-Men. And then there's there's the other things. You don't necessarily like put those in the same conversation. Um, so it really wasn't until I was in my early teens, and I started really recognizing names and faces and some of the history of comic books, and I started to see all the people who would come speak to my father when we go to conventions. Because even in my teens, when we would go to conventions, he was still a publisher in some regards. He was still a person who owned a lot of creative intellectual properties. So he was actually at conventions not just to sign autographs and books and things, but also to promote his characters, to do
Mhm.
business deals. It was still a very business oriented thing. But I would see people show up, like Neil Gaiman and Jim Lee and Frank Miller and all these other people who are starting to kind of get an understanding for who they were. And that's kind of when I started to put it together. Um, and uh, I guess the toughest part of it was when I was about like 16 or so. That's kind of when I decided I was going to go into comics and commercial art. And that's
Mhm.
also around the time that dad kind of decided he was going to go back into mainstream comics as well. So uh, that's kind of when it became like a really big wake up call. Like, oh, he's not just, a really good illustrator who does a lot of commercial art and also does comic books or did comics in the 70s. He's,
Mhm.
a force.
Yeah,
so,
he's the
so
man.
I, yeah, so I'm just getting serious about it. And then he's just kind of, warming up the old muscles to do some flexing again. And it's my work back then is a far cry from what he was doing. So it certainly felt like a pretty uphill battle. But
He's Go
yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say to as far as just influence professionally, um, he was just always there. Um, really as a father, it's
Mhm.
it's um, you have peers, and that's great. um, and you have teachers and things, people who are there to mentor you, but to have someone who has been through it and at the highest levels to also be your father is a unique gift, um,
Yeah.
because my struggles were intimately familiar to him. He just
Mhm.
knew everything I was going through, you know, um, and deeper than just the practical challenges of making comic books. He knew the emotional side of the process. He knew the kind of maturing arc that creators go through when they're newbies to having to really hit their deadlines and pay all the bills and support themselves with this. So it was
Yeah.
always great to have him there. Um, there was a point where I was questioning whether or not I wanted to do comic books, and trying to it was a tough thought process. And I was doing commercial art at the time, and I remember coming into the studio, and Dad was working on comics, and he had pretty much largely stopped doing commercial art at that point and was doing comics full time again.
Hmm.
And we talked about it a little bit, and I said, well, the commercial art, it pays really well. Um, the schedules, while they are strangely daunting, they're not as intensive as doing comic books, and I could make a good living doing this. And he kind of looked at me and he said, yeah, man, but comic books, like, that was the whole argument. And he was in his he was in his 70s at the time. Like, how can I question even that succinct wisdom, have him having earned that wisdom over the course of 50 plus years in the business.
Right. It's similar to something because I have 3 out of 4 of my children are grown. And when my oldest son, well, my oldest, Ashton, when he was, graduating, and I said, well, he's an artist. And I said, well, what is it that you want to do? And he said, well, probably go to S&T and Rolla and become an engineer to make money, and do comic books as a hobby. And when I get big in it, then I'll just switch to that full time. It's like, okay, it doesn't work that way, son. If you want to do something, you've got to go for it. You know, full steam ahead, throw everything into it. If you don't, you won't make it. And if you do something else, if you do anything else other than the thing that you were passionate about, chances are you're going to sabotage that other thing subconsciously or otherwise. You're just not going to be happy. And one way or the other, it's just not going to be successful for you. So I'm still working on him. He's 23 now. And I'm still telling him because a friend of ours is at Lions Forge up in St.
Hmm.
Louis.
Yeah.
And they said, make a phone call and get you an internship. You can intern up here. He's
That's
like,
cool.
oh, but internships don't pay. And it's so hard to try and talk to your kids about this stuff. You were saying how how much of a gift it was that your dad had been through that, and he was able to give you these pointers and advice because he had been through the exact same thing. But what I run into with my teenage kids is they know everything. Was
Yeah.
there ever like this moment when your dad's trying to advise you and you're like, you're old, what do you know?
Um, sure, absolutely. Gosh, I mean, I don't know if I can nail specific moments, but I absolutely felt that way. I don't think it's avoidable when you're a teenager. Um, ours had, again, because we were basically in the same field,
Mhm.
ours had, sort of macro and micro examples of that. Um, it could have been, a big thing, but he tried not to harp on me. He tried not to, kill the natural motivation of something, but he would,
Mhm.
like try to hint at things. I'd be working. My desk when I was in living with my parents was, just a few feet away from my dad's desk, and he'd walk by, and I'd be working on something, and he'd like look over my shoulder, and he'd be like, "You sure about that hand there?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I'm okay." And I'd look at it and be like, "Damn it."
Yeah.
You know, but I wouldn't want to admit it. So I'd get frustrated. I'd be stubborn, and I'd just like, you know, try and ignore uh,
Yeah.
that piece of subtle advice. You know, but it
My
was right.
my oldest daughter and I, she's 18 right now.
Mm.
Mm. And we lock horns constantly because I see her doing things that I did. And I was, like, I can tell you how that's going to end. And she'll always, oh, but I'm not you. It's different. Like, you're right. It's easier for you right now. It's way harder for me back then, but still, just it when you're that age, I really feel like you lack the chemical capability to fully comprehend what's happening. Your parents aren't trying to brag or make it about them. They're actually
Yeah,
trying to make things easier for you. But
absolutely.
we're humans and we learn by messing up. So of course we're not going to listen. But
Yeah, yeah,
oh, kids. But that's I wish I could have had a parent that was an artist that could have, nurtured that. You're so lucky, not just because your dad was Neil Adams, but our generation, our parents tended to be more, well, that career's not really sustainable. You need to find you a backup. You need to find, a normal job, something that pays the bills, and then do the other thing. That was what our generation heard growing up
yeah,
when we were picking careers. But you were lucky enough to have this parent that was an artist. It was like, oh no, you can totally do this. You just got to devote yourself to it. That's awesome.
yeah. It's strange because I think about the the baby boomer generation, and
Hmm.
that group that kind of grew up, and the world was their oyster. They could kind of go and become whatever they wanted to be. College education wasn't super expensive. Housing prices
Right.
weren't that expensive. And at the same time, I think of our generation and the next generation, and yeah, it's harder. It's financially so much harder to
Hmm.
keep the lights on, to pursue a dream career, but also at the same time, there's more opportunities than there ever were, and there's more
Right.
paths to success than there ever were.
Right.
So there is room for people to have a regular job and then pursue something on the side, um, because we have the internet. And you
Mm.
can have a web comic, you can have a webtoon, you can have something from a whole new dynamic, and you have um, free education out there, not in the forms of colleges, but um, in the forms of just YouTube
YouTube.
videos and
Yeah.
online learning sites, and just on social media. It's all out there for you.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like, for an artist who wants to make it now, um, the possibilities are out there. You just really have to have that internal drive.
Yeah.
And I was talking with someone I work with earlier today, and um, we were discussing, I guess, the concept of talent. It's a very weird, mysterious word because it doesn't really mean anything. Um, and I interpret talent as more like a drive to succeed in a certain area,
Huh.
because I feel like most things people have, the ability, I mean, most things have a certain mechanical function, right? And so in theory, we should be able to do things. Obviously, there's an understanding beyond this that I just don't have, on a really deep level, a scientific level. But technically speaking, everyone should be able to draw. Everyone should be able to play the guitar. Everyone should be able to do certain things like that. But the people who I guess you'd say are talented are the people who look at the task of doing those things and have that drive to succeed at it. And that means nothing for anyone else who does not succeed at it. That doesn't make them failures. It gives them an opportunity to look at the problem differently, I think, and not to
Mhm.
go, oh, that person's talented, I'll never be able to do that. It's like, no, you just have to reframe your mindset and say that person had the drive to do that, and I have to find the process that drive to do that.
That's a really good way to look at it. I used to draw a lot when I was younger. I became more of a writer
Mm.
later, but I started off just constantly drawing. Um, and one of my friends, oh, you're so good. I wish I could do that. And how can I learn to do that? And I would just say, and I don't know what, I don't know, it just kind of popped out. I said, it's just knowing where to put the lines. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think I had any like really strong natural ability. I knew where to put the lines, and once you know where to put the lines, the rest is gravy. Just and
Yeah.
it's kind of
And
that ambition to learn where to put them.
yeah. And you mentioned writing. I think writing is a wonderful example of how talent is not such a defined thing. Writing is hard. It's not easy, but it has both the impression of being easy and the results of being difficult, because everyone goes, oh, anybody can write, but not anybody does write. People
Right.
write and fail, or people say they want to write something and they start it and they never finish it. There's a certain drive that you have to have an idea in your head and go through the entire process of putting that on paper and reviewing it and revising it and discerning the most credible way of making it a compelling story or paper or whatever your goal is. But
Mhm.
everyone does have the ability to, if they find the drive, become a writer,
Mhm.
you
And
know?
I always felt like it was you have to have the ability to get out of your own way.
Sure.
Just
Yes, absolutely.
let it come. Write what wants to be written. Um, and it sounds like a batshit crazy thing to say, write what wants to be written. But if you've ever written anything, you know that's the absolute truth. If it
Yeah.
if it's not something you're into or is ready to come out, it's not going to. But if you
Yeah.
just chill, don't take yourself too seriously, don't worry about embarrassing yourself, which was my issue. I'm not saying it's anyone else's. Um, just
Yeah.
let it come out. I love writing when I love it. And that old Mark Twain quote, write what you know. Boy, it's so true, but it's true on many different ways that you look at it, if you know, I don't know how to make dremels. You know how to make a dremel,
Yeah.
and you understand mechanics. Throw that in there. It just, I don't know. I'll get off on a tangent about that. And and
Well,
I'm way more articulate in print.
yeah, that's the thing. That's something I can understand too. Um, I think one of the hardest things for people who want to do something like writing or drawing or anything like that to understand is that, uh, the first thing you have to do to succeed at writing or drawing is to write and draw.
Mhm,
These ideas and these visuals exist in your head, and you go, man, it would be so cool if I could make this thing happen. And that sort of becomes the beginning and end of it. And
mhm.
they don't go, well, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to write, or I'm going to sit down and I'm going to draw this. And if it sucks, then I'll fix it. and that becomes that's really it. Like, it isn't really harder than that for anything.
Right.
Um,
And it's always good to fail a couple times.
Absolutely.
Like, it really is.
I posted a piece today on online, and I considered it a failure. Um, I shared it because I put the work into it, and
Mhm.
I felt like there was something to be learned from it, and part of learning from it is letting other people see it. Um,
Mm.
some people will be like, oh man, I know you said it was a failure, but like, oh, it looks really good anyway. And you can be polite, ignore that anyway, largely. But there are some people who will have some insight, um, or you just kind of get just a sense for how it does in front of an audience, and you go, okay, well, I know it failed in a certain area in a composition, or I didn't plan out the final execution well enough. But putting it out there, I'm now seeing that more people liked it than not. So maybe I should be taking another look at this and saying, well, where did I succeed? Or no one liked it, and I go, my feelings on it were correct. um, but you have to live with your failures, and you also have
Mhm.
to be able to throw them out there and move on to the next thing, um, after
Yeah.
acknowledging that they're there. But it's a process. I mean, one of the things I used to hear my dad say, or paraphrase from my dad, is, sometimes you draw 1,000 bad drawings just to learn how to draw one good one. You know, um,
Wise, wise
yeah.
words. Your dad, is obviously, I did not know him, but I'm a big fan of his work. I've seen a lot of interviews with him. Uh, the one I watched most recently was the Batman and Bill documentary on Hulu. Um, and he always struck me as, a very straight shooter, very practical. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's not right. Like, he didn't seem to be like the type of person to mince words, is I think what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
Yeah. I think if you live an honest life, um, and you're open about yourself and what you do, I think that's easier than most people think. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know if people just don't really do that so much. I try to live an honest life. I'm not very open about my personal life so much. Like, I don't like broadcast a lot of
No,
my
that's good.
my personal life with family. But, creatively, I'm very honest with people, and professionally, I'm very honest and straightforward with people. And I think that comes from Dad. He was very honest and straightforward about things. He and I think also because of that, whenever he did see something that was a problem, he would just go to fix it,
Mm,
because there was no there was no real hardship in having to fix something. You're just
right.
making things better.
Mhm.
um, and I think in the scheme of things, the personal sacrifice to make something bigger better, uh, it pales in comparison to the better that you can make the bigger thing. um, so he always just went for it. And he took that into a lot of aspects of his life. I mean, when he ran his studio, he would have commercial clients who would pay the studio months after the job was done. But every time he had freelancers working for him at that studio, he would always pay at the end of the week, regardless of when the freelancers the clients would pay, because he wanted the people who work for him to trust him and to want to be
Yeah.
there. So that's just it. I think it was one of those aspects of him that matriculated throughout everything he did.
I just closed a salon. Like, I business owner. I owned a salon for 3
Mhm.
years, and I had employees, and there were times where, I mean, let's face it, the last 3 or so years have been the worst for American small business. And I'm in a luxury industry. That's always the first thing to go, or the hair colors, the haircuts, all that stuff. Everyone decides to let their mom do it, and
Yeah.
whether they should be or not. Um, but I always made sure that, my stylists had something. If someone called or walked in, I would give it to them first because I wanted them to want to be there.
Yeah.
I wanted them to know that no matter what, I'm going to do my damnedest to take care of them. If you don't do that, they're not going to take care of you.
Absolutely.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
But I I can't I can't say that I completely share in it, but the entire world uh, mourned your father this last year. I
Mm.
can't imagine what that was like for you. But in that same year, you won the Pulitzer. Like, I
Yeah.
I can't imagine the conflict that you had to feel knowing that, the man who really helped me in this and, pushed me along the way to getting this is not here to share in this moment. Like, I can't imagine. Bittersweet.
Yeah. It was tough. The announcement for the Pulitzer Prize was, I mean, maybe it wasn't even a week after Dad had passed away.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
um, I think to put it best, I was still pretty raw about,
Yeah.
passing. Um, and not to mention, he also passed away on my birthday. So that's pretty, pretty bizarre.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but yeah, it was a weird time. But yeah, that announcement came, and you know, you can't. I couldn't feel, I suppose, as excited as I would under a normal circumstance.
Right.
Uh, but I felt happy for the people I worked with because we did it. It was a team effort,
Mhm.
and I spoke with everyone that was on that was on that project, and expressed my congratulations, and we shared in all excitement about it. Um, thankfully, there's an amount of disbelief that comes from something like that, so that
Mhm.
like they're all in disbelief, and I'm really just kind of a little numb about it, so I don't have to pretend to be super happy. I can just you know hide in the disbelief. um, but it eventually it sank in. It was a big deal, and I was grateful for my father because of that. He was very much an activist for the comic book industry.
Yes.
He very much wanted to tell important stories, um,
Mhm.
and that was very much something that drew me towards the work that we did to win the Pulitzer. Um, so it meant something to me to win it because it showed what comic books can do, or what a comic narrative can do in terms of conveying real important stories. Um, yeah.
Well, tell us about the project that
The
won you.
project. Well, yeah, I work for a company called Business Insider, or Insider as it's been rebranded, and it's a news media company online, and
Mhm.
we were doing a series of nonfiction comic book or comic format stories. So we would cover things like the pandemic, and we covered January 6th. We covered um, some international things, but we had changed our format to start doing firsthand account stories of people who were sort of in the midst of major, uh, uh, I guess you could say, historical events, major current events. And so our first one was um, about a woman in China who was a Muslim woman who was part of the Uyghur people. and how she was basically put in internment camp for her faith, and taken from her family, and the struggle she had to deal with, and eventually her escape from China to the U.S. Um, and we told that story, and it's an emotional story. I got to meet her, uh, Zumrat Dawit, and she's a lovely woman, and it meant so much to get to be part of the team that told that story, especially after meeting her. More so than winning the Pulitzer Prize. Just getting to do that for someone who went through so much. And we got to bring her along to the actual Pulitzer event, which was
Oh,
very
that's wonderful.
wonderful. Her and her husband came, and it was a very special moment. It had a because of that, even alone, it had an importance that was larger than any personal thing that someone's going through. Um, but since then, we've kind of committed ourselves to doing more stories like that. And so this last month, we released 3 more stories, and we're planning on doing more. I think we have maybe 5 or 6 more in us this year, for 2023, and we'll see what happens.
That's such a great idea. Um, you know, I said I'd become a writer. Well, I published in 2006, and I wrote this book all in metaphor, and I wrote it for myself.
Mm,
Um I grew up disabled. I'm an amputee, and I wrote this book in giant metaphor to kind of deal with that, to kind of mourn the woman I thought I was going to be and accept the woman that I became. And I turned it into a vampire slayer.
mm.
It was fun.
That's one of the wonderful things about,
Mhm.
I guess, creative writing, about
Mhm.
fantasy, is that it can um, create a path for you to understand yourself or understand
Yeah.
a particular problem, both
Yeah.
on a personal level and even just on a larger scale. I mean, uh, look at the
Mhm.
book Mouse by Art Spiegelman. That's a wonderful telling of World War II and the Holocaust through a
Mhm.
sort of a metaphorical perspective, um, and it works. It helps hold your hand, through
Helps you
difficult
understand. Yeah.
issues.
Helps you understand it in a way that you can when otherwise you would just not be able to because you have no other frame of reference. That's
Absolutely.
a phrase I use a lot when people are like, they have me explain this to them and what I've been through will make me understand.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can explain it. But when they don't have a frame of reference, you do have to come up with, metaphor and analogy. And that's
Yeah.
what makes storytelling so magical, you know? At least to me.
And
Um,
people use those types of things. I mean, you said you used vampires, or Vampire Hunter,
mhm,
as your metaphor, as your storytelling device, and that's not the most uncommon thing. I mean, uh, uh, zombies have often represented some sort of you know global plight or things like that, or even other types of you know villainy and things like that. So it's
mhm.
definitely an understood tool in the creative toolbox, so to speak.
So you've worked on a lot of projects.
Mhm.
Doctor Who, a bit of a Whovian. I don't know if you could tell.
Same. I've worked on a lot of projects, some more well known and some less well known. I've been freelancing since I
Mhm.
was I guess I did some freelancing when I was in high school. But my first, my first big, I wouldn't call it a job because it was an internship, was at the Sci-Fi channel when I was 17.
So cool.
I lied about my age to get in there because they wouldn't otherwise have a 17-year-old as an intern.
Good for
Yeah,
you.
there's some paperwork at NBC Universal that says I was born a year before I was supposed to be born. Um, and I interned there. I interned in the graphics department on the East Coast, and so a lot of that
Mhm.
was um, working on a lot of like the in-house advertising stuff. But there was also a lot of like pre-visualization for shows. We'd have like scripts in from shows, and we'd have to kind of create like mood boards and different illustrations. And so, I got to look through like a dozen scripts for things that would end up becoming TV shows on the Sci-Fi channel, and do some sketches for them and come up with things, and they would just get handed off, put in the deck and handed off to the next person. And I never saw what became of them, but there were like moments where I'd see a show that would come on, and I'd have like remembered reading the script, and I'd see something that could kind of be inspired by things I sketched. I'd be like, oh man, that's amazing. Like I was 17 years old and they have these sketches they probably looked at and were like, oh, hey, let's do something like this. So that was, one of the earliest things I got to work on. But experiences like that led me to really pursue a lot of just, diverse opportunities. So, Sci-Fi I worked for a long time. And after I interned, I ended up working for them as a freelance illustrator. But I bounced around. I worked on some movie projects. I worked on some TV projects, and I did just all sorts of random things. And there's so many moments where like someone will bring me something to sign at a convention, and I'll be like, right, I worked on that thing. And I completely forgotten about it. But yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, I worked on Doctor Who. That was really a dream project for me. And I can admit now that I was absolutely not ready to work on Doctor Who, at least like in the balance of, reverence for a topic and readiness to treat it as such. Um, I loved Doctor Who. I loved watching the shows. I was a huge Matt Smith
Mhm.
fan. And
He's my favorite. He's my doctor.
yeah,
You know,
he was.
my sister-in-law, hers goes Tennant, then Smith. Mine is Smith,
Yeah,
then Tennant. And who
yeah,
doesn't love Amelia Pond and Rory Williams? I
absolutely,
love them.
absolutely. And River is amazing.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Oh, I love Rivers so much.
I've I got to meet Matt Smith, and I got to meet Alex Kingston, and they were
Mhm.
awesome.
I'm trying to
And
meet Alex Kingston. I've been sending her messages.
I met her at Florida SuperCon. I was a guest one year that she was there, and when we got there, we had all gotten our like guest badges, but I brought my daughter, and they didn't have a guest badge for her. So they were like, "Oh, we'll just give you a VIP badge." And so they gave her a VIP badge. And so when it came time to go, we wanted to meet Alex Kingston and do like pose for a photo with her or something. So we got online, and there was like, I don't know, like 100 people ahead of us. And one of the people in front of me looked down at my daughter and was like, "Oh, your daughter has a VIP badge." And I was like, "Okay." It's like, "Well, that means you get to go first in line." And I was like, "Well, is that okay? Like, okay?" And like everyone online was like, "Yeah, yeah, totally." And so like I brought my daughter up, and so she was like the first person that got to meet Alex Kingston, and
That's
she signed
amazing.
the Rivers Sonic screwdriver for her that we brought along, and she posed for a photo. And my daughter was like, I don't know, like 8 at the time. She was pretty young, and so it was really awesome for her, and she was super sweet. Um,
That's
but
so
yeah, and then
cool.
yeah. Then I remember meeting Matt Smith in New Orleans at a convention, and he was really nice. And he signed. I brought a double page spread from a Doctor Who piece I did, and he signed that for me. Um, I have a thing. I have a thing that my wife and I do where rather than like if we get to meet a celebrity, rather than have them sign like a photo or something like that, I'll usually do a piece of art, or if I have a piece of art already done, I'll get them to sign that. That way, there's kind of a little bit of a deeper connection to it. Like
Yeah.
it's not if I
Yeah.
tend to. So I've got Matt Smith signed art. Like I said, we have the Alex Stevenson Sonic Screwdriver, which is my daughter's, but she leaves it here. Got a Chris Hemsworth signed piece, and Bruce Campbell signed piece of art, like Army of Darkness, and got a whole bunch like that. I can't even remember half the ones we have. There's a Nathan Fillion one from Firefly.
Oh, I love him. And I loved Firefly. I
We,
loved it.
we had a weird experience with Nathan Fillion because I totally was geeking out over the prospect of meeting him, and I think we met him and we got the thing signed, and I was really awkward about it. And we were also guests at the same show. And so like the day that happened was also like we were coming back to our hotel from the show, and he was coming back to the same hotel, and all the guests were on the same floor. So like I made an awkward first impression, and now we're both in the elevator. And now we're both leaving the elevator, turning down the same hall, walking down the same way, stopping on the same side, and he's like 2 doors down from me. And it's just so awkward.
I'm not stalking you, I swear.
and then after all that, after the show is over, I met up with, and I try not to name drop. I just happen to know a lot of awesome people. Phil Lamar stopped by my table, and so we were talking. We were talking, and he was like, "Oh, let's I'm just gonna grab my stuff from the what they called the gold room at the show, because comic guests got to go to the green room, and we all thought that was awesome, and we wondered where all the celebrities were, and then the celebrities got the gold room, which is even more fancy. So we went to the gold room with him, and I went to the gold room when he grabbed his stuff. He came back, and we bumped into Nathan Fillion, and so he was talking to Nathan Fillion while I awkwardly stood there being like, "Oh man, I feel so weird right now."
That is so cool. I have
I get a lot of good opportunities with people. So
Phil Lamar and I have a mutual friend, and our friend is actor. He was just in Willow. He was the troll Falcon. He was Falcon in Willow, and he keeps telling me, just send him messages. Just send him messages. I'm like, I am. I just really want to talk to Phil Lamar. He's my Green Lantern. He's
yeah. Well, that's how I got to know him, because he was a fan of Dad, and he was Jon Stewart on the Justice League, and so one year he came to meet Dad, and Dad and I had both watched Phil on Mad TV, so like we were already fans of him, and so he just kind of became a friend of the family, and awesome. And he's super sweet. He's a really nice dude. So yeah, if you ever get the opportunity.
That's what D keeps him. He's like, he's a really nice guy. Just keep messaging him. I'm sure he gets lots of messages. So just keep messaging. Eventually he'll see it. I'm like, okay.
I drew in a sketchbook. I did a sketch of him. Yeah, I drew in a sketchbook. He's got a sketchbook from a bunch of different artists. Daunting to be asked, but I did that. I drew him. I honestly don't know if he was offended by this. I drew him as a ventriloquist with a puppet box of all his characters.
That's cool, though. That's a really cool concept. I love that. So, he's got.
I hope he liked it.
Oh, I'm sure he did. I mean, that's a great idea, because look at all the things he's done, all these projects that he's worked on.
Yeah,
he is the voice for their mouths.
Yeah, I got Jon Stewart in there. There was Static. There was what's the I'm forgetting his name now. Oh man, the character he did from the Foster's for Imaginary Friends. Yeah,
I can't remember the basketball, the tall.
Yeah. Wilt?
We'll think of it later when we're on the toilet or something. Like
and then a bunch of other ones, that he did. It was really sweet, and I love him. I love Craig of the Creek, which he does a voice on now too, and that's one of my favorite shows now.
I haven't seen that one.
It's so good.
Craig of the
It's on
Creek.
Cartoon Network. It's
Okay.
yeah, it's about a kid and his two friends, and like all the kids after school go into the woods, into the like near the creek, and they have their own adventures. And there's a lot of like kind of kids make believe, but like taking it very seriously. Like
Yeah.
there's another side of the creek, and there's a kid who pretends to be the king of that side of the creek, and they have their like little conflicts, and they growing up. It's so sweet. It's a wonderful show.
I will have to check that out because that sounds like right up my alley. I love kids' imaginations. We need to keep encouraging that. And the show sounds like it does that. We got to glorify kids' imaginations, because if we don't, we're going to grow up with adults without imaginations, and that sounds like a really, really boring world to me.
It's weird to be in a world where like I get to draw comic books and work on wild projects, and then see all the people I grew up with who are all like bankers and lawyers and doctors now, and like great, that's awesome, but like
So, because out of the many projects you've worked on, what would you say is the one that's closest to your heart? Would it be the project that you won the Pulitzer for, or is there another one that just really?
I think they all kind of have different meanings for me. I mean, I would say the most important thing I've ever worked on is probably the stuff I'm doing with Insider now.
Mhm.
Because on a again, I'll use this phrase, but on a macro and a micro level, it's meaningful to people. These are personal stories,
Mhm.
and they have the power to reach people who otherwise wouldn't see them. The format of comic books can be so approachable
Mhm.
to audiences that aren't necessarily clicking on current events articles or watching the news, or just aware of things that are going on around them. And so having something that's respectful but a little flashier than a regular news article um, can get to people, and these stories can soften people to wanting to learn about the things that are going on around us. So I'd say it's the most important thing I've done.
Mhm.
But there are other things I did that were really meaningful to me. I mean, I was so proud of the work that I did on Doctor Who, even though I can look at it now and be like, I wish I was more experienced when I did that than I was. But I was so proud of it because it was, a project I got myself on. It was a project I worked hard on, and was for something I loved. Um, I loved working on House of Mystery with my dad.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
that was a wonderful opportunity, and another one I feel like I worked really hard for. I mean, I part of that story took place in New York City at a museum, and so I went out with my friends and shot them, as did photography of them for reference, and like really tried to give it my best. And that was like, it has a strong memory for me. I got to work on a kid's book with Mick Foley, a professional wrestler, and that was a huge honor.
Really?
Yeah, it was a book called A Most Miserable Christmas, and I think it was like his third Christmas book,
He
or
loves Christmas.
whatever. And so, I mean, it's a funny story. I was in San Diego for Comic Con, and I was just hanging out at my table, and Jill Thompson comes up to me, and Jill is a wrestling fan, and I'm a wrestling fan, so we kind of connected on that level. So there was an immediate, like, she had a need that involved wrestling, so she came to me, and she had a phone up to her in her hand, and she's like, "Josh, are you busy?" And I was
Mhm.
like, "Not really busy. I don't. My convention experiences are not like filled with commissions and things. I tend to like avoid doing commissions." uh, I always say, like, people are like, "Oh, your commission prices are pretty expensive," and they're like, "Yeah, I don't want to do them." So,
I can
uh,
relate.
yeah. So I was like, yeah, I'm not busy. What's up? And she's like, I don't mean like at the con. Like, what's your schedule like? And I was like, oh, I guess I'm all right. It's kind of open right now. And so she hands me her phone and she goes, "This is Mick Foley. I need you to talk to him." And so I put the phone up to me and like not believing that for a second.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, Jill says you can. Jill says you're available. Can you draw a book for me?" And I was like, "Who is this? What's going on here?" Oh, and the other question she asked me was, "Can you do watercolor?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And I hadn't done watercolor before that. That was a lie. But I learned from my dad, when someone asks you if you can do something, you say, "Yeah, of course," and then you just figure out how to do it. So he's like, "Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, and I don't know who else to turn to. So if you can do this, I would love for you to do it." And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And it was like 40 pages of watercolor, and we had to get it done in like 2.5 weeks. So as soon as I got off the phone, I handed it back to Jill, and we're like, "Is everything good?" And I was like, "Yeah, everything's good." And she's like, "Great." And as soon as she was gone, I grabbed the directory for Comic-Con. I looked up the nearest art booth that had like art supplies, and I got a watercolor set, and I spent the rest of the convention practicing watercolors. So when I got home and I got the script, I can just know what I was doing. But yeah, it ended up going well, and I was really proud of that one too. I didn't sleep for like 2.5 weeks, and I did like 40. It was like 42 pages or something like that. It was insane. Um, I think I did like, gosh, what was it? I must have done like 3 spreads a day for that 2.5 weeks or something like that. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. 2 to 3 spreads a day. But yeah, and I was really proud of that. That was a great experience. I did another one where I got to work on a movie doing like the prop, like doing, they needed a prop comic book. And it was like a cool thing to do. They were like, "Oh, can you do this comic book? I want it to be like Al Williamson style." And I remember I got to talk to the director, and he was explaining to me that it had to look like an Al Williamson comic book, and thinking to myself like, "Oh yeah, I'll just learn to draw like Al Williamson. That'll be easy."
What was the movie?
It was a movie called The Tall Man, and it was not like a major theatrical release, but it starred Jessica Biel, who I was a huge fan of. I thought that was really awesome. And it was kind of like a
I think I've seen
horror
it.
thriller. Huh?
I think I've seen it.
You made it? Oh, it's possible. I don't even think the prop made it into the final cut, which is what kind of sucks. But like, it was
You still got
really cool to
paid.
do it. And then I got paid. At the bottom line, at the end of the day, getting paid. That's all that matters. After the production was over, the entire cast and crew like signed the book for me, and they sent the prop to me. So it was like, oh, I got that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So yeah, you get to work on all these random projects, and I think they all just kind of, I think because they're so diverse and so, different, they're just different, and they have different challenges. You kind of take something special away from all of them, and that's oddly enough, that's kind of the reason why like I forget some of the things I've done, because like there's so many different things, and they all have
Right.
their own little like special place in my head and my heart, that like when I'm so focused on like the now, there's this strange like remembrance when someone brings up something that I did 10 years ago. And it's crazy to think like, oh my god, I've been doing this now for what, 17 till now, so what, 18 years or something like that. Like, I've been doing it longer than I haven't been doing it at this point. So
I had that same realization myself when I, well, technically retired from
yeah,
cosmetology. I was like, I have been doing this almost 20 years.
yeah,
That's so weird.
yeah.
It's so weird.
And
So,
through all the
no, go
craziness and
ahead.
ups and downs, yeah, through all the craziness and ups and downs, the good times and the bad, it still goes by like you're having a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Anyway,
I completely agree.
yeah.
So, what are you working on now?
Well, we've got a full slate of books for Insider that's coming out, and
Mhm.
I'm working with a company called Zest World,
Mhm.
and They are an online comic book publisher for creators. It's creator owned comic publishing.
Awesome.
And I've been working with them. I worked with them since like early on in the company to try and help them like test out things that they wanted to do, and they're really great
Mhm.
people. Um, and it's one of the reasons why I talk about like the more opportunities out there than there ever were before. It's places like this that they give you a platform. It's like having a social media account that's designed for publishing comic books. And it's free to join, and you can start getting subscribers, and you can start making posts, and you connect with your audience, and at the same time you publish comic books. And so I've been working on a project that I'm going to publish through them, called Culture Shock, and it's about a superhero or a person with superpowers who is
Mhm.
desperate to just be a normal person. Unfortunately, he discovers that his job is a front for, or his temp job is a front for a supervillain. And when a team of misfit superheroes comes to save the day and stop the villain, he has to actually save the heroes, and basically gets himself stuck with this weird ragtag group of misfit heroes that he wants nothing to do with. Um, and
That's
it's really all about
great.
struggling to live your life and finding, uh, again, that with great power comes great responsibility, so to speak, that he has to be a superhero even though he really just wants to you know have a suit and work a boring job and not be noticed.
Yeah, and let's face it, this is something that I don't think we understand as kids. This is something that comes later with age that we understand, but anytime we read something about superhero or mutant or whatever, just wanting to be normal, that is just a giant metaphor for being different, for being born different, for just being different and wanting to fit in.
Yeah, well, and,
And
and yeah, part of fitting in is just the ability to succeed in life.
mhm,
Like, uh, when you're different, it feels like everything is harder. And
yes.
um, and this is also, I mean, there is a certain thing. I mean, there's a little part of me that's in a story like that goes, you know, what I can add to it, writing what I know, so to speak,
Mhm,
is, you can have ability, um, but that doesn't make life easy. You can
right.
still you can be great at something, but you still struggle to pay the bills, to keep the lights on, to try and live a normal life. Um, and that's something, you grow up and you're the school artist, you're the son of a legend or whatever, and there's still, that doesn't make things easy.
Right. There's expectation, there's pressure.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a little bit of an inspiration behind some of that story. I also want to write a story that's just a little bit absurd. So you know the concept of a group of superheroes just trying to drag this guy kicking and screaming into being a superhero when that's the last thing he wants to be, it's, to me, has a room for laughs.
I think it sounds great. I'm really looking forward to it. It really sounds like something I would really, really like. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people will like it. And this
Yeah.
Zest world is so it's kind of like YouTube for comic books, basically.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because it's a lot of, there's a lot of social interaction. Everything that is published there is owned by the creators, 100%. Um, they're trying to debut new features all the time. They have a digital
Mhm.
commissions feature, which is really cool. So like you can go on there, and if you want a piece of digital art from an artist that you like, you go to their profile and you just commission them. And so it's a really great thing. I mean, I'm not saying go to my profile and commission me, because I hate that, but you offer it. Um, but uh, those it's a group of very forward thinking people trying to create a platform that is tailored to comic publishing. So you have, before Zest World, you had people going to like Substack and things like that to try and publish comic books, and it's Substack's great. It's a large audience. It's got great reach, but this is more tailored to what we're trying to do.
I'm right at this moment actively stopping myself from grabbing my phone and texting my son saying, "Go to zestworld.com. You're welcome."
Yeah,
Like, no,
you
wait
can.
till
I
you're
can.
done. Wait till you're done.
I'll send you a referral, and he can sign up through me, and that will give him a recommendation. So
Oh, cool. Thanks. Yeah,
yeah,
he's a very talented artist. I mean, he's a good writer. He's got great ideas. I want so badly because right now he's working as an auditor for Holiday Inn, and I'm like, you've got to be miserable. He's got this creative, artistic, imaginative soul, and I feel like I'm just screaming in front of him, like, no, go draw.
it's challenging. I mean,
Yeah.
there were days where I mean, before Insider came around. I mean, was it 2019, like September of 2019. I was like, okay, I'm not going to do comic books professionally anymore. I'm just going to do commercial art. Going to do storyboards and you know whatever came my way. It paid really well. It was so much easier to like pay the bills and keep the lights on doing that stuff. And my
Mhm.
last hurrah was going to be New York Comic Con in 2019, which is in uh, October. So I geared up for October. I did the show. I set up. It was going well. It was nice nostalgia to see all my friends. And I was fully committed to just be like, all right, I'm hanging up. I'll do comic books for myself,
Mhm.
and that'll be it. Um, and then this guy came to my table named Walt Hickey, and he said, I'm from Insider, and I have this idea about doing nonfiction comic books. And he gave me a packet, and I was reading the packet that had like some story ideas about current events, and it like triggered an excitement in me that I hadn't had in a long time, um, because I could feel immediately the potential for doing great
Mhm.
things with comic books and the news and journalism. Um, and so I talked to him, and he was like, "Yeah, let's talk on Monday." And so, uh, like first thing Monday, I called him like right after the show. I was like, "Let's do this." Um,
And who would have thought, back in the 30s when this whole medium started, that it would, you know, be used to actually tell legit journalism?
yeah,
That's that's
I guess
cool.
the strange cyclical concept behind it is
Mhm.
comic books were originally, I guess, a way to keep the presses hot, so to speak. They took all the
Mhm.
comic strips and they collected them into book format, and they printed them when they weren't printed in newspapers because it would keep those relief
Mhm.
presses ready to go when the newspapers came around. So, in a strange way, the origin of comic books was a way to aid journalism. And now I come all the way around, and now comic books gets to be a tool for journalism.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, poetic.
Okay. Yeah,
Poetic and
exactly.
wild. Well, Josh, thanks for coming on my show, man.
Sure.
Thanks
Yeah.
for sitting and hanging out with me. I mean, this I really enjoyed this.
It was a good time. I had a good time.
Good. Would you this is just you don't have tell me no, but occasionally we do lives and stuff, and we like
Mhm.
to talk about things like, let's see. This is my idea pad.
Mhm.
I'm just going to be honest with you. I'll get stoned and then all of a sudden have to write things down. So some of the ideas we have are, are we too old for superheroes? Are adult expectations stealing the magic or our ability to enjoy things?
Mm.
Superheroes and psychology. Are comic books good for our mental health? Can't relate. Characters that we never understood. But every once in a while we have, live streams where we have a panel of people, we get together and we discuss topics like this. Would that ever be something you'd be interested in doing?
Sure. Though I warn you, I have a pragmatic debate style for my zeal over the how good comics can be for people of all ages. So you
No,
will
that's excellent.
I will take people down if they disagree with my belief that comics are for everyone. Yeah,
That's fantastic. That's
but
absolutely
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. I mean, it's not to go deep into it now, but
Mhm.
the one thing that I I struggle with comic books these days is the idea that comic books aren't for everybody.
Right.
Or like, Batman needs to be a mature comic book. It can't be for kids. It's like, of course it can be for kids. Make Batman for kids. You can also make Batman for adults, but like recognize that, all the people who are saying that Batman is for adults used to read Batman as kids. So
Yeah.
how ridiculous is that? It's inadvertent gatekeeping, but like,
Mm. And
it's
it's
just,
also called hypocrisy.
yeah, exactly. I sure I want to read a dark, brooding, realistic Batman, and I also want a Batman that can like the animated series. And if you do know how to write, if you are a good writer, you can do both. You can do both in the same story. I don't think
Mhm.
anyone who wants a mature, gritty Batman now can look at the animated series from the '90s and be like, "That's not that." You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
No
Just go find Paul
kidding.
Dini. Paul Dini will tell you how to do it, and he'll put all of us to shame who think that only one demographic can enjoy a comic book.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, where can people find you? Like, where can they find more information about you?
Let's see. I'm on Twitter at Josh Adams. Uh, I got Twitter ages and ages ago when it was really easy to just get your own name. And seeing as I have a name that sounds like like the create a character basic in any video game, that's saying something. Um, I'm like one step away from John Doe, and
Josh.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So I'm just at Josh Adams. I didn't get to Instagram as fast, so my Instagram is shortened from my website. My website is whatwouldjoshdo.com. So
Which I
my
think is a genius
yeah,
idea for a web
My I'm
address.
not religious. I got it because I had a very religious friend in college, and we took a web design course together, and I made a joke about what would Josh do, being what would Jesus do, and he rolled his eyes at me, and he's like, "You're not going to do that." And I was like, "Oh yeah." And so I've now had that email, that website, since I was like 18 years old.
That's
But yeah,
fantastic.
so whatwouldjoshdo.com is my website, but my Instagram is www.joshed, just to keep that thing going. And I think I'm at my zestworld.com/Josh Adams. So you can
Okay.
jump in there, you can subscribe. I've got a newsletter. Um, and yeah, I'm feeling really like it's a good place for me to communicate with people without I guess the craziness of social media these days.
Yeah.
And so like I'm writing some of my first posts on my newsletter, and I'm being very open and honest about just the way things have been going the past year, as well as just talking about my work and some behind the scenes stuff, and just kind of like an in-depth look into the process, and I guess who I am, a little more personal than I used to be online, because it's a very kind of personal space. But yeah,
Got
that's
it.
where you can find me. I've got a Facebook fan page. I can't remember what the heck it is right now. So whatever.
If I'm on Facebook, it's probably just to post a new video or something.
Yeah,
I got
I
kind of sick
have
of Facebook.
yeah, I have Facebook to like keep track of like college and school friends and things like that, and that's like it. Like I rarely post on there ever. I mean, I post on the fan page more than I post on my own personal profile, but like it's so hard to go on the internet and you sit around in your regular life and you have this thought in your head and you go, I'm going to put that online, and then you like write down like 3 or 4 sentences. You go, this is a waste of time.
Yep, delete.
Just yeah, it's really why I don't share a lot of my own like personal life, because what am I doing? What are we doing?
Hmm.
Yeah. And then people go out and they curate their lives and they post it on the internet and present
Yeah,
this like perfect image of themselves. And I don't want to be you know fake about who I am, but I also don't really think everyone needs to know everything about me.
I
So
completely agree with you on that.
so that's why
100%.
yeah. So that's why I feel like my Zest World newsletter can be kind of a nice medium between that. I can talk a little bit about just the world of being an artist and a creator, and actually share comics as well.
Well, I'm going to check it out as soon as we're done, and I'm going to text my kid and tell him to get on that. I've I've been trying to convince him for years now, like, because I can't draw like I used to, and I'm
Yeah.
old, and I've been doing hair for a million years, so my hands hurt. Like, I would love to turn my book into a comic. I feel like that was my goal, because when you read it, it reads kind of like chapters or like weekly issues.
Hmm.
I really want to do that. And so I grabbed my kid. I'm like, hey, let- let's do this. And he's like, okay. So I'm
Uh,
going to send him to Zest World and be like, hey.
yeah. And you can, and it works on, you can post stuff there for free. You can also have a subscription model there, so
Mhm.
like people pay every time you send an update for your comic book, which is cool. That's awesome. But you can
That's
also just
super
put stuff for
cool.
free. It's amazing the way that the internet has made producing creator and comic books so much more accessible. Whether it's Zestworld, whether it's Webtoon, or just doing your own web comic, or just there's opportunities, or posting on Instagram. You can get your stuff seen by people, and you can build an audience. If your stuff is good, you can build a really great audience pretty quickly,
Mhm.
and the stuff gets shared. I mean, can't tell you how many times I scroll through Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and a comic strip pops up, like from someone who doesn't buy comic books, just someone who just saw this funny 4 panel thing and was just like, that's like my life, and they share it.
Mhm.
There's a reality to that. I feel like everyone in the world has seen those comic strips with the aliens doing human things and kind of
Yeah.
describing the universe. Yeah, that's such a like that's a comic. That's a
Mhm.
comic book that like everyone on the planet is looking at.
Mhm.
So yeah, why
You're a wise man, Josh Adams. Wise man.
yeah. When you do comic books or you do creative endeavors, you're driven to tell a story, and part of you is just this absolute, just desperate mess for approval. And
Yeah.
it's so much easier when you can just throw it up on the internet and just get hundreds or thousands of people to just like hit that like button or retweet it, or put a little heart on it or whatever, and you go, oh, that feeds my soul, that feeds my selfish little narcissistic soul.
Well, I haven't gotten the hundreds and thousands yet, but fingers
Same, same. We're still
crossed.
striving. Yeah,
Right.
you'll get
I'm
there.
still pushing forward. But
There's
thank you
yeah,
again for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm gonna shoot you a message probably tomorrow or whatever about some live stream topics and see if we can connect
awesome.
there too. Cause I think it would be awesome to have you on a panel. I mean,
Sure.
you know your shit, man.
Uh, Gosh, yeah. I well, thank you. It's weird to accept that I'm knowledgeable on a topic, but yeah, that's great. You know,
Well, every once in a while, that'll happen to me, or I'll say something, or I'll hear a name and I'll go, oh, I know that name. Oh my God, I really do know about this stuff. Yay, me.
yeah,
Well, nerdlings, thank you also for hanging out with us tonight. Make sure you smash the like button, hit the subscribe if you're new, and ring that notification bell so you get notified whenever I'm back with another one of these magnificent videos. Until then, have a great night. Have a wizard weekend, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.